I knew things had gone to hell the moment Blake, our fresh-out-nowhere VP with the ego of a frat god and the resume of a trust fund failson, paused mid-stand-up and said, "Camille won't be leading ops anymore. She's pivoting to a more client-facing role." Translation: I'm benching her at the front desk because I don't like the way she breathes. Then he winked at his new pet intern like they'd just pulled off a corporate coup. The room went quiet. Nobody blinked. Nobody objected. Just a few pitiful glances from coworkers who used to CC her on everything now, pretending they didn't know how to spell her name. Camille stood there with her hands clasped and a soft smile stretched so tight it could have sliced drywall. She nodded once. Didn't even flinch. And if you're still here, first off, bless your curious, chaos-loving heart. Let me break the fourth wall for a sec. 97% of y'all tune into these stories without subscribing. That's like showing up to a potluck, eating all the chili and ghosting. Tap that subscribe button, drop a like. It keeps our team caffeinated and slightly less emotionally unstable. Thanks. Now, back to the train wreck. Camille packed up her desk that afternoon with the precision of a bomb squad tech. No drama. No "you'll miss me when I'm gone" speeches. Just a cardboard box, a faded mug that said "Operational Badass," and a decade of strategic intel tucked neatly behind her silence. Reception was a downgrade in every sense. One flickering light above, a drafty corner next to the always jammed printer, and a rotating view of corporate suits who barely acknowledged her. She didn't mind. It gave her time. Time to observe. Time to breathe. Time to remember the exact timestamp when things began to rot. See, Camille wasn't the shouting type. She was the type who remembered what tie Blake wore when he tried to take credit for her Q4 rollout. The type who knew the difference between oversight and calculated omission. While Blake was busy flapping his gums about vision, Camille was already quietly documenting every inconsistency like a war widow pressing flowers into a Bible. No one told her about meetings anymore. Her calendar, ghost town. Operations board she built from scratch, replaced by some color-coded nightmare that looked like a toddler's first attempt at Excel. And yet, every client email still somehow landed in her inbox first. They still asked her questions, still trusted her tone. And that's when she realized something. Demoting her didn't erase her. It just gave her the best seat in the house to watch the whole damn house burn. First crack came when she noticed a name pop up on the internal logs: Andrea Kay, the CEO's assistant. Not unusual in itself. What was odd, she never signed in, not once. Always slid in through the side conference room door like a ghost in heels. No badge pings, no digital trace, just there, then gone. Camille started keeping a second log. Handwritten, ink, and patience. Because she knew the official records were as clean as Blake's conscience. But her log saw everything, and it remembered. By week 2, Camille's name had been memory holed like she was a disgraced game show host. Project folders she used to own were suddenly scrubbed clean, replaced by vague Final V for use, this one real files authored by interns who thought a pivot table was a yoga move. Meeting invites dried up like office coffee at 4 p.m. Even her Slack mentions slowed to a trickle, till the only pings she got were from HR reminders and the occasional reception, "Can you let Postmates in?" Coworkers passed her desk like she was radioactive. Some gave her a weak half-smile. Most just stared straight ahead like avoiding eye contact would keep their careers from catching her demotion like it was viral. And honestly, she didn't blame them. In places like this, silence was survival. No one wanted to be caught siding with the woman who got booted from ops for committing the cardinal sin of being competent in flats. Meanwhile, Blake strutted through the halls like a rooster in a startup incubator, trailing behind his new strategic advisor, a fresh-out-of-college blonde named Lexi, who used phrases like synergistic leverage and thought quarterly reports were super optional vibes. Camille recognized her immediately. Blake's old intern, same girl who once asked Camille if Outlook had a snooze button. Now she had business cards with embossed letters. They made a point of holding their little innovation powwows directly outside reception. Loud enough for Camille to hear Blake say things like, "The old way was too rigid. We're streamlining, cutting fat." Lexi would giggle like he'd told a joke, instead of casually insulting the very system that kept the company from imploding every Q2. Camille did what she's always done, observed, listened, took notes. She started carrying a sleek little leather notebook, just big enough to jot timestamps, names, phrases. It became her secret second brain. A ledger of pettiness, patterns, and little red flags nobody else noticed because they were too busy sucking up or clocking out. She logged everything. when Lexi's title changed from advisor to VP liaison overnight. Blake approved a vendor expense she knew had been flagged just a month prior. When a client call ended oddly early, and Blake emerged from the conference room, adjusting his tie with a grin that reeked of dollar store cologne and ego. And then there was Andrea Kay again. Camille noticed it one night while checking the digital guest log for a late delivery. Andrea's name had never been entered, not once. But Camille had seen her, on the lobby cam, clear as day, walking in through the back hallway entrance that looped around the main offices. Always after 6 p.m., always alone, always carrying a slim laptop case and something that looked suspiciously like the firm's internal rate card. Camille tilted her head at the monitor, narrowed her eyes. Andrea wasn't visiting for coffee. She wasn't just swinging by. This was deliberate and unauthorized, and still not a single entry in the guest log. Camille opened her notebook, flipped to a clean page, and wrote 2 words, Andrea Kay Ghost Visits. Underneath that, she started a column for dates, times, and who else was in the building. Because if no one else was going to pay attention to the cracks forming under Blake's little empire, Camille would. She'd watch. She'd wait. And when it all crumbled, she'd have the receipts written in her own steady hand. By the 3rd week, Andrea's ghost routine had become a rhythm every Thursday, right after the 5 p.m. exodus, like clockwork. Camille would hear the soft click of the side conference room door, a sound no one noticed except the person paid to hear everything. No greeting, no security ping, just heels on laminate and a flicker on the corner security monitor that nobody watched but her. She'd appear on screen like some executive apparition, always with that same smugly neutral face, like she'd just meditated on a yacht. Office was supposed to require digital check-ins after hours. Supposed to, but Andrea never scanned her badge, and nobody questioned it, because Andrea Kay wasn't just anybody, she was the CEO's right hand. The kind of assistant with a private extension and the power to schedule or unschedule your career. Camille leaned back in her rickety reception chair, clicked the timestamp on the feed, and jotted it down in her notebook. 6:14 p.m., side door. No badge. She flipped to the fresh section of her journal and began her own real log, not the sanitized digital one HR loved, but one written in cheap Bic pen and sharpened suspicion. She wrote, unauthorized visit #1 Andrea Kay, 6:14 p.m. conf RMB, no sign-in. That was the first. Then came the next Thursday. Then the one after that. Always the same door. Always the same ghost walk. And each time, Camille cross-referenced the visit with something odd she'd noticed during the week. A client account that went dark after confirming their renewal, a billing adjustment made outside the usual window, a mysterious internal transfer with no attached paperwork. There was a new client from San Diego, big fish, high maintenance. Camille remembered helping onboard them before her demotion. Then, poof, overnight, their service package was cut in half, and their renewal terms changed. No one mentioned why. But the day before that contract revision, Andrea had made a 7:22 p.m. visit, stayed for 40 minutes, left with a folder tucked under her arm. Camille began to underline the visits in red ink when they coincided with suspicious account activity. The red began to bleed across her pages like wine on cheap linen. She didn't ask questions, didn't raise alarms, just kept smiling at delivery drivers and resetting the Wi-Fi every time IT had an aneurysm. She answered phones. She forwarded calls. She refilled the candy dish. And all the while, her logbook grew page by page, line by line. One entry read, visit #4 Andrea Kay, 7:08 p.m. Same folder as last week, left with coffee from Blake's desk. Camille circled it twice, because that was the same day a priority client received an adjusted invoice Blake swore was a clerical error. Coincidence? Maybe. But Camille had stopped believing in coincidences around the same time Blake started quoting Sun Tzu in meetings. Every time Andrea showed up, something changed. Contracts vanished. Clients were reassigned. Budgets were massaged. It was all too neat, too practiced. Camille ran her fingers over the grain of the notebook cover and pressed her thumb into the corner, leaving a crescent mark. She wasn't a frontline worker anymore. She was the last line. The one person watching the gate, while everyone else pretended the castle wasn't rotting from within. And she wasn't just watching Andrea anymore. She was watching what followed her. It happened on a Tuesday, right around the time Blake decided reception was also his personal sound buffer. It started pacing near Camille's desk for calls, because apparently walls were for the old guard, and acoustics didn't matter when your ego was louder than your voice. She was pretending to update the flower delivery log, really just drawing angry daffodils when she caught it. "We'll handle that through the side channel. No need for procurement to slow it down," Blake said, voice lowered but not low enough. "Just get Camille to push the adjusted scope. She's got the context." Turned, saw her looking up, and smiled like a man who just farted in an elevator and blamed the intern. "Oh, hey Camille. Didn't see you there," she just blinked. "Need me to log that call?" He waved her off and walked away, leaving behind the faint stench of overconfidence and Axe body spray. That phrase, side channel, clung to her ribs like a bruise. Not because it was shady, it was, but because it was the third time she'd heard something like it in a week. Clients had been calling, friendly at first, then confused, asking about service changes Camille had no knowledge of. One had even thanked her for the rate cut. "Thanks again for working with us on that budget bump, Camille. Your flexibility really saved the deal." She smiled through gritted teeth. Of course, always happy to help. Then hung up and stared at her blank call log. That client was on Andrea's visit list. Thursday, 6:41 p.m. Camille pulled her notebook from the drawer like it was a revolver. Flipped pages. Checked timestamps. That same client's invoice had been adjusted the next morning, cut by 12% with zero documentation. And yet, her name was suddenly in the conversation. No way in hell that was accidental. She started combing back through emails, call summaries, chat transcripts, anything that could anchor reality to something more solid than Blake's PowerPoint lies. The pattern emerged like a mold stain under wallpaper. Andrea would show up. Blake would hold a strategy sync. The next day, an account would shift. Sometimes it was a budget change. Sometimes it was a reassignment. But always someone, either a client or a rep, would mention Camille's involvement. But she wasn't involved. She was out here playing lobby greeter while someone else wore her name like a costume. That's when the anger started to rise, not hot and loud, but cold, concentrated, like the quiet moment just before the sirens start. This wasn't just sneaky. It was impersonation, identity laundering in a pantsuit. She remembered one especially loyal client, a small veteran-owned firm from Indiana, who'd emailed her a thank you note for making the executive override happen. She hadn't even seen their contract in 2 months. Camille stared at the screen. Her jaw clenched so tight she thought her molars might crack. She clicked through her log. Andrea had been in the building 12 hours before that email. She flipped back to her notes, drew a hard, vertical line between Andrea's name and the word override. Then, beneath it, in all caps, "Someone is using me." Camille looked up at the blinking light on the landline. 3 voicemails, 2 missed calls. And now, one woman with a notebook full of ghosts and a truth no one wanted to hear, yet. Camille started playing dumb like it was chess. Every smile at the front desk had a rook behind it. Every "can I get your name for the log" was bait dangling on a hook. She wasn't just checking guests in anymore, she was laying traps with a ballpoint pen. She tweaked her script, just slightly, slid in questions that sounded casual but were sharp as glass. "Oh, are you here to meet with Blake or someone else? And did you have an agenda today, or just catching up like last time?" Stuff like that. Innocent on the surface, perfect for catching someone off guard. And then it happened. Thursday afternoon, senior client contact from Phoenix, Big Fish, walked in wearing a Patagonia fleece 2 decades too late and a Bluetooth earpiece like he was auditioning for The Apprentice. Camille greeted him with her usual smile. "Welcome back. Need me to let Blake know you're here?" He chuckled. "No worries. I already caught up with you last week in Blake's office, remember? Laid out the new service tiers like a boss." Camille's smile froze just enough to notice if you were watching. "Oh, right. Remind me again what day that was." He frowned, thinking. "Wednesday, I think. Late afternoon. That was the day she left at noon for a dentist appointment and hadn't come back. She'd spent the whole afternoon in a waiting room flipping through 2018 People magazines and ignoring calls from Blake's assistant asking if she was available for a quick sync. Camille's pen clicked open like a weapon. "Of course. Great seeing you again," she said. "I'll make sure your badge is reactivated for the floor." She handed him his temp badge, then turned back to her desk like nothing happened. But inside, cold, white-hot rage simmering under still water. Because this wasn't just some sleazy deal happening behind her back. Someone had walked a client into Blake's office, sat them down, pitched new services, and pretended to be her. Someone had used her name, her authority, her goddamn trust. She opened her notebook, flipped past the ghost visit pages, and started a new section. Client interactions, false identification. She logged his name, the date, the fake meeting, and who else had been in the building that afternoon. There were only 2 possibilities. Either Andrea was posing as her to clients directly, risky but possible, or she was feeding Blake enough of Camille's past strategies and phrasing that he could puppet her ghost in a meeting without blinking. Worse yet, if Andrea was using her email, her Slack handle, or even a copy of her pitch decks, then Camille wasn't just being erased, she was being recreated in someone else's image. And none of it could be proven yet. She pulled up her old shared drive access, the ones she'd quietly kept login access to by accident. Sure enough, old decks had been opened recently, cloned. The version history showed Andrea's credentials and Blake's IP. Camille closed the window, sat still for a long moment. Then she did something she hadn't done in months. She ordered new notebooks, 3 of them, hardbound, indexed. She was going to start organizing everything, by date, by incident, by unauthorized interaction. Because if they wanted to build a Frankenstein version of her in the dark, it was going to drag it into the light. The doors burst open just before noon on a Wednesday, shattering the usual rhythm of courier drop-offs and tech bros forgetting their laptop chargers. A man in a tailored charcoal suit barreled into the lobby like a Wall Street missile. No hello, no eye contact, just a sharp, flat sentence. "Where's Camille?" Camille stood slowly, like her spine had been waiting for this exact moment. "That's me," she said, calm but wired tight enough to snap piano strings. He looked her up and down, confused, irritated, sweating just enough to stain the collar of his Brooks Brothers shirt. "Your assistant sent my office a pricing model update. Said we were behind on adoption metrics. I came in person because this wasn't what we agreed to." She blinked. "My assistant?" "Yes. Camille, your calendar invite, Monday, 3 p.m. Subject line said Q3 override follow-up. Pulled out his phone, opened the invite. Sure enough, it was from her name, her email handle, her goddamn signature line. The only problem, Camille hadn't worked on anything Q3 since Blake turned her into lobby furniture. Her smile was soft, almost maternal. The kind of smile you give someone just before the hammer drops. "Do you mind if I show you something?" she asked. He hesitated, then nodded. She turned her monitor to face him. Opened her Outlook. No sent invite. No meeting entry. No override file. Then she opened her physical notebook, page after page. Neatly dated entries, cross-referenced logs, highlighter marks, Thursday night visits from Andrea, suspicious document access, an entire column labeled unauthorized client engagements. She flipped to the section with his company's name, pointed to a line. "According to this," she said, tapping the date, "someone met with Blake and Andrea 2 days before that invite went out. I wasn't here. In fact, I was on PTO." His eyes scanned the page. His face dropped. The color drained from his ears like someone had pulled a plug. For the first time, he looked at her like she wasn't a receptionist, like she was something more dangerous than polite, a liability to the wrong people. He slid the phone back into his coat pocket. "I need to make a call." She nodded, turned without another word, and walked out of the building, his polished shoes thudding on the lobby tile like distant thunder. Camille stood frozen for a full 30 seconds, letting the silence settle. Her heart wasn't racing. It was hammering, rhythmic, heavy, alive. She stared at her hands, steady, no shaking, just the warm bloom of vindication rising in her chest, but with it came a flicker of dread. This wasn't just another entry in her notebook anymore. This was a trigger, the person she just handed it to. One of the firm's top 5 clients. Deep contracts, long-term renewals, a personal friend of the board. She sat down, reached for her pen. Trigger event #1 name, D. Ryerson C-level, core client. Walk-in complaint fake meeting invite. Evidence provided, status disturbed. She put the pen down, exhaled slowly. The dominoes had started to fall, and there was no unringing that bell. By Friday morning, building hummed with a different frequency, quieter, tighter, like the walls were listening. Slack channels went dark. Meeting rooms stayed booked but empty. Camille noticed the sudden appearance of suits she didn't recognize, neutral expressions, leather briefcases, eyes that scanned everything twice. Rumor had it Ryerson filed a formal complaint directly with the board. Not Blake, not legal. Straight to the top, like a lightning bolt through a copper pipe. Whatever he said had sent the C-suite into full-blown cardiac arrest. Because by noon, Camille's badge no longer worked for the reception floor. It worked for the 10th. Legal. She took the elevator up alone, logbook tucked under her arm like a priest holding the good book at a funeral. Her heart wasn't pounding anymore. It was still. Cold. The kind of cold that comes from knowing the grenade's already been pulled. You're just deciding where to throw it. 2 lawyers waited in a glass box conference room. Both had the same corporate haircut and the same synthetic smiles. "Camille," one said, gesturing to the seat like this, was some casual chat about holiday party logistics. "We're reviewing recent irregularities," said the other. The board has requested all documentation related to visitor activity, especially after hours. She placed the logbook on the table like it was nothing more than a pizza menu. Flipped to the first ghost entry, then the next, then the next. Her voice was calm, flat, no flair, no performance, just facts like rainfall, Andrea, Blake, times, days, after-hours visits, no badge pings, no digital trace. And yet dozens of undocumented meetings, almost all followed by contract changes. They stopped her halfway through. One of them leaned in, tapped a page near the middle. "This one," he said. Camille looked. #19 Andrea plus Blake. 7:36 p.m. Conf RMB. Folder marked confidential restructure draft. It matched the timestamp of a client contract that had mysteriously vanished from the firm's archive 2 months ago, a contract that had since been renegotiated at a loss. The client had never signed off on those changes. No email, no recorded call, only a meeting that never officially existed until now. Camille sat back in her chair, watched their faces. No one spoke for a full 30 seconds. Then the lawyer closest to her closed the logbook, slow and deliberate, like he was sealing evidence in a courtroom. "Do you have a copy of this?" "I do," she said, "and backups." "2, actually." He nodded once. "You'll be hearing from us again soon. Please keep this confidential for now." Camille stood, straightened her sweater. Of course. She didn't say "I told you so." She didn't say Blake's a fraud or Andrea's a snake. This place runs on women like me being invisible until they are indispensable. She just walked back to the elevator, the logbook still warm from the hands that had tried to bury her. As the doors closed, she caught a flash of Blake in the hallway, talking too fast, gesturing too wide. His tie was crooked. His smile gone. She stared straight ahead. The grenade was no longer in her hands, but she'd pulled the pin just right. By Monday, Blake was in full damage control, sweating through his pressed shirts and gaslighting like it was a PowerPoint skill set. He was cornered, and you could smell it. Word was, he'd stormed into a leadership sink that morning and launched into a speech about witch hunts and toxic note-taking cultures. He called Camille obsessive, said she had a vendetta after being graciously repositioned, claimed her notebook was a fabrication, retrospective fiction, he called it. She'd self-published a damn thriller just to ruin his Q3 bonus. But the problem with fiction is, it doesn't come with timestamped camera footage and server-side badge logs. Camille didn't even have to speak. Legal had already compared her logbook to building security data. Entry #19 showed Andrea and Blake's keycard swipes. Side conference room, no other entries on the official guest log. No calendar invites, no oversight approvals. Those folder names, Legal matched them to deleted file traces in the shared drive, metadata intact. They'd been renamed, reshuffled, and marked Archive OLD in a desperate attempt to bury the evidence. But Camille had logged the original titles, down to the typo, in strategic review. Andrea was placed on immediate administrative leave. No warning, no explanation, just a polite HR escort and a stiff goodbye email that landed with the weight of a funeral notice. Blake lasted another 5 hours. He was mid-sentence in a Zoom call with client relations when the screen froze, his audio cut, and the Blue Office 365 lockout screen flickered to life. His Slack went dark. His badge deactivated. Someone said they saw him trying to badge into the kitchen afterward, like a glitching NPC. All that remained was the sound of him yelling in the hallway about context and temporary authority privileges. Camille sat at the front desk, silent, watching it all like someone witnessing the controlled demolition of a building she'd long stopped calling home. No cheering, no tears, just the quiet bloom of vindication expanding in her chest like a lung finally refilling after years underwater. She kept answering phones, logged a delivery from FedEx, smiled at the barista who dropped off Blake's usual oat milk latte, now growing cold in the corner like a forgotten apology. That afternoon, an all-staff email hit in boxes. Effective immediately, an external compliance firm has been engaged to conduct a full audit of internal account operations. Camille didn't blink. She'd already printed a copy of her logbook for them, marked with colored tabs and cross-referenced with the building's own access logs. Everything dated, every line clean, no embellishments, no fluff. The receptionist smiled at the auditors when they arrived. "Can I help you find anything?" Camille asked. One of them raised an eyebrow. "We're looking for the primary log of unauthorized activity." She opened the top drawer, handed it over. Years of quiet labor, every overlooked email, every late-night policy memo. Every time she cleaned up someone else's mess and swallowed the credit whole. All of it had led here, not to a round of applause, but to consequences. The conference room was cold on purpose. Air conditioning dialed to corporate discomfort trademark, chairs spaced just far enough to remind everyone that warmth was not on the agenda. Camille sat at the end of the long glass table, opposite 6 board members in navy suits and one very silent legal rep. And next to them, Ryerson. He didn't smile, just nodded once in recognition. He was acknowledging a peer, not a receptionist. No small talk, no thanks for coming. Just one question, dropped in the room like a lit match. Why, Ryerson said, voice low and deliberate, was your CEO's assistant meeting with Camille behind closed doors, if Camille wasn't even aware of it? The silence stretched like tar. Camille didn't look at Blake, seated stiffly near the corner, pale and rigid like he'd been exhumed from a trust fund grave. She opened the logbook, calmly flipped to the page, tapped it once. I wasn't, she said, but now we know who was using my name. You could hear the oxygen leave the room. The board chair leaned forward. We've seen the log, we've seen the footage, we've confirmed access logs. Ryerson tilted his head, so this wasn't just miscommunication. This was impersonation. Misrepresentation of authority to a C-level client. Legal started talking. Possible fraud, misappropriation of company resources, identity falsification across multiple contracts. Liability exposure extends. Blake stood up like he might say something. He didn't. He just stared at Camille, eyes empty, mouth tight. A man who finally understood that the house of mirrors he built had glass floors, and she'd been watching from underneath the whole time. Someone whispered into a phone. Andrea was already gone. Not just from the building, but scrubbed. Email forwarders disabled. Internal profiles vanished. The kind of vanishing that happens when lawyers outnumber marketing. Camille closed the logbook, folded her hands, waited. Then the board chair cleared his throat. We'd like to offer you your original position back, plus oversight of a new operations unit. Full autonomy, better pay. We recognize the value you've shown here. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I appreciate that, she said. But no. Silence again. Or stunned this time. I kept the place standing once, she said. No interest in rebuilding what shouldn't have cracked to begin with. She stood up, collected the logbook. But then, as she passed reception on her way out, she paused. Opened the top drawer, placed the logbook inside. Left it just slightly visible. A reminder. Not loud, not bitter. Just present. So if anyone ever asked who really held the line while the leaders played dress-up and fraud roulette, they'd have the answer. Her handwriting. She stepped out into the sun, the door hissing closed behind her. No fanfare, no applause, just peace. Her revenge didn't need fireworks. It had timestamps. What I love about this story is that Camille never raised her voice. She just kept the receipts. It's a reminder that quiet people often carry the sharpest knives, and sometimes the most powerful revenge is calm, patient, and undeniable. Thanks for joining the fun, you office survivors. Subscribe for more switch-flicking drama. Let's make your former coworkers sweat.